The resignation letter took me 3 drafts and one very long bath to write. Draft 1 was too emotional. Draft 2 was too cold. Draft 3 was a single paragraph that said everything it needed to say without saying anything at all, which, as it turned out, was the only language that felt safe when it came to David James. I printed it on Monday morning, slid it into an envelope, and left it on the desk of his personal assistant, Weena, at precisely 8:47. I remember the time because I checked my watch twice. I had a whole plan. Leave the letter, go to my desk, work through lunch, avoid the 42nd floor for the rest of the week. Let HR process everything, be gone by the end of the month. It was a good plan. It lasted until 9:15, when my office phone rang and Lena's extension lit up on the display. Mr. May. Her voice had that particular professional neutrality that she deployed like a shield. Mr. James would like to see you. I closed my eyes. Now? Now. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor had never felt so long. I stood in the mirrored cab and watched myself breathe. Alvin May, 29, Senior Acquisitions Analyst at James Capital Group. 2 years and 4 months of service. 1 resignation letter. Approximately 312 days of being in love with a man who had never once given me a single concrete reason to believe he noticed me as anything other than an employee with an unusual eye for undervalued assets. That last part was the problem, really. Not the job, not the hours, not even the salary, which was objectively excellent. The problem was David James himself and what it had started to do to me, being near him every day. His office occupied the entire north end of the 42nd floor. Floor-to-ceiling glass on 2 sides, the city spread out below like a map of everything he already owned. He was standing when I came in, which he rarely did when meeting with staff. His back was to me, hands in his pockets, looking out at the skyline. He was 35, tall, the kind of quietly handsome that operated like slow poison, not immediately overwhelming, but cumulative. Dark hair that was always slightly imperfect, like he'd run a hand through it on the way to the office and decided the result was good enough. A jaw that I had spent an embarrassing amount of my working life trying not to look at directly. He turned when he heard the door. Alvin, not a question, not a greeting exactly, just my name in that low, even voice, like he was confirming I was real. Mr. James. I stopped in the middle of the room, which was further from his desk than was probably natural, but I needed the distance. You wanted to see me. He held up the envelope, my envelope, the letter that was supposed to disappear into the machinery of HR and process itself into my freedom. He set it down on the desk between us, unopened. Sit down. I'd rather stand, actually. Something shifted in his face. Almost nothing. Anyone else in the building might have missed it entirely. I had spent 2 years learning to read him in high resolution. Alvin. Again, that way of saying my name that I could never fully interpret. Sit down. I sat down. He remained standing, which put him at an angle where the morning light caught him in a way that felt personally unfair. He looked at me for a long moment without speaking. This was a tactic. I knew it was a tactic. He used silence the way other people used arguments, filling it with pressure until the other person cracked and filled the space themselves. I had learned not to crack. Mostly. You want to leave, he said finally. That's what the letter says, yes? Why? Not even a question mark. Just the word, direct and flat, like he was asking about a quarterly report. I had prepared for this. I had 3 answers ready, all of them reasonable, none of them true. The offer from a competitor. The desire for new challenges. The natural progression of a career. Any of them would have worked. Any of them would have let me walk out of this office and never have to sit 3 feet away from him again. Never have to hand him coffee during late sessions. Never have to notice the way his whole face changed when a deal came together exactly as he planned. Professional growth, I said. Silence. I've been in this role for 2 years. I'd like to explore other opportunities. More silence. Mr. James, the letter is standard. I've given 4 weeks' notice, which is rejected. I blinked. I'm sorry? Your resignation. He sat down now, settling into the chair behind the desk with the calm deliberateness of someone who had never in his life been anything other than entirely in control of a room. Rejected. I stared at him. You can't reject my resignation. I just did. That's not how employment law works. I'm aware of how employment law works. He folded his hands on the desk. His eyes were dark and very steady and completely unreadable. I'm not holding you here against your will. You're free to walk out that door right now. But the letter, as a formal document, I'm rejecting. You're not leaving because of professional growth. That's not a reason. That's a placeholder for a reason. My heart was doing something irregular. I pressed my feet flat against the floor to ground myself. I'm not required to give you a specific reason. No, he agreed. You're not, but I'm asking for one anyway. Why does it matter to you? You have 15 analysts. The department will function fine. I'm not asking about the department. The room went quiet. Not the tactical silence from before. Something heavier. I don't understand what you're asking then, I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt, which was the one small mercy of that morning. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he opened a desk drawer, took out a sticky note, wrote something on it, and slid it across the desk toward me. I leaned forward enough to read it. Take the week. Come back Friday, and tell me the real reason. Then I'll countersign it if you still want me to. I looked up at him. You're giving me a homework assignment. I'm giving you time to think. He clicked his pen closed. Go home, Alvin. Take a few days. Come back and we can have an honest conversation. What if I just don't come back? Something that was almost a smile crossed his face and entirely failed to reach his eyes. Then I'll know you weren't ready to have the conversation. I picked up the sticky note. I folded it in half. I stood up and I walked to the door, and I had my hand on the handle when he spoke again. For what it's worth, he said, very quietly, I hope you come back. I came back on Friday. The honest answer, obviously, was that I was in love with him. The honest answer had been true for approximately 14 months by the time I wrote that first letter. It had started so gradually that I hadn't caught it until it was already comprehensive. A slow accumulation of small moments, each one individually insignificant, collectively catastrophic. The first time I noticed was during a pitch presentation in the main boardroom. I'd been with the company for about 4 months. I was presenting analysis on a mid-sized logistics firm we were considering acquiring. Midway through, David, Mr. James, I still thought of him as Mr. James then, asked me a question that cut straight through the surface of my prepared slides and went directly to the structural issue I had been carefully not mentioning because I wasn't sure the acquisition team wanted to hear it. The question was, have you considered that the liability on the Northeastern portfolio might be masking a deeper problem with their procurement chain? I had. I had considered it at 2 in the morning, written 4 paragraphs about it, and then deleted them. Because I was new and I didn't want to derail the process. I said so. Not the deleted paragraphs part, just that I'd considered it. And he said, quietly, in a room full of senior partners, let's hear those 4 paragraphs. I don't know how he knew. I still don't. But he looked at me like he already understood exactly what I'd been holding back. And the way he waited, absolutely still, completely patient, like he had all the time in the world and was choosing to spend it listening to me, undid something in my chest that I hadn't known was held together. That was probably the moment it started. There were others. The late nights during the Henderson deal when we were the last 2 in the building, and he brought me coffee without asking how I took it, already knowing. The time I made a small error in a client-facing report and expected the cold professional correction I'd seen him deliver to others. And instead, he came to my office, sat across from me, and spent 30 minutes walking through the numbers until I'd found the error myself. He didn't point it out. He let me find it. The time I overheard him telling a partner that May's instincts on the Harlow portfolio were worth more than the quantitative model. And I'd stood in the hallway with my heart doing something completely undignified. None of it meant anything, obviously. Or rather, all of it was professionally appropriate. He was simply that kind of leader. Observant, patient with people he respected, precise with his trust. I had watched him be similarly attentive with other senior staff. Except I had also watched him be dismissive, clipped, unavailable, and quietly devastating to people he considered to be wasting his time. And I had never, not once, experienced that version of him, which either meant I was doing my job well, or it meant something else. I had spent 14 months refusing to find out which. The Friday I came back, I sat in the chair across from his desk again. He had coffee waiting, 2 cups, both black, as if he'd known I would come. I hated that he knew how I took my coffee. I hated how much I loved it. You came back, he said. You said you hoped I would. He waited. The thing about David James was that he never rushed anyone. He had the patience of something geological. He'd sit there, looking at you with those dark, steady eyes, and the silence would build up around you like water. And eventually, you'd either swim to shore or drown. But you'd always move. Nobody stayed still indefinitely under that kind of attention. I don't know how to have this conversation, I said. Start with what's true, and we'll navigate from there. I looked at him. My coffee cup was warm between my palms. The city was gray and low outside the windows. Somewhere below us, the building was full of people doing things that mattered, and I was sitting here about to say something that couldn't be unsaid. I think staying here is getting harder, I said carefully. For personal reasons. Personal reasons. Yes. To do with the work? No. Silence. He was watching me with the particular attention he usually reserved for contracts he wasn't sure he trusted yet. Personal reasons to do with someone here? He said, after a long moment. My jaw was very tight. I'd rather not specify, Alvin. I'd really rather not specify, Mr. James. David, he said. I looked up sharply. In 2 years, he had never asked me to use his first name, not once. It was not unusual between senior staff, but I had never. I've always thought it was strange, he said, that you call me Mr. James when we're alone. When we've spent more late nights in this building together than I've spent with most people I consider friends. It's a habit, he said. Habits can change. He looked at me for another moment. You don't have to tell me who it is, but I want to ask you something else. Okay. Are you unhappy here? In the work, in the team, in the culture, setting aside this personal thing, setting it completely aside, are you unhappy? The honest answer was no. The honest answer was that this was the only job I had ever genuinely loved. That the work stimulated me in ways nothing before it had. That I was good at it in a way that felt earned rather than accidental. And that if I could surgically remove the complication, the 14 months, the coffee, the way he said my name, I would have been completely, unreservedly content. No, I said. Then stay, he said simply. Whatever the personal thing is, you don't have to tell me, and it doesn't have to change anything. But don't leave a job you love for something that might resolve itself. He slid my resignation letter back across the desk toward me, countersigned with a single note in his handwriting. Postponed, by mutual agreement, DJ. I took it. I folded it. I put it in my jacket pocket. Mutual, I said. I didn't exactly agree. You came back on Friday, he said. That was agreement enough. I went back to my desk. I worked through the afternoon. I did not resign again for 4 months. The second letter was written under duress. Specifically, the duress of watching David spend 3 hours at a company event talking to Marco Reyes from the investment banking division, who was charming and tall and laughed at everything David said like it was the most delightful sound in the universe, and who was, objectively, exactly the kind of person David might actually like. I know how that sounds. I know it sounds like exactly what it was. I had been sitting with this feeling for 18 months by then, and I had done a fairly good job of managing it, compartmentalizing, focusing on work, treating it like a low-grade chronic condition that didn't significantly impair function. And then Marco Reyes happened, and the compartment cracked. The second letter was shorter than the first, more decisive. I was not, I told myself, doing this out of jealousy. I was doing it because I had developed an unhealthy emotional attachment to my employer, and the mature self-protective response was to remove myself from the source of the attachment before it became something I couldn't manage. That was a completely rational reason. That was essentially therapy advice. I left it with Lena again. This time, I didn't even make it back to my desk. Mr. May, Lena's voice on the phone before I'd even sat down. Mr. James would like to see you. Does he have a scanner in the lobby? I asked. A very slight pause. He'd like to see you immediately. He was sitting at his desk this time. The letter, still in its envelope, was in front of him, but he wasn't looking at it. He was looking at me. Again, he said. Again, I confirmed. Sit down. I'd rather stand. Alvin. I sat down. Some reflexes apparently survived any amount of emotional turmoil. Do you want to tell me what happened between your last letter and this one? He asked. Nothing happened. I thought more about what I said last time, about personal reasons, and I've concluded that the right course of action is, was it the event last Thursday? I stopped. What? His face was doing that almost nothing that I had learned over 2 years to read as something. His hands were flat on the desk. Still. I noticed you left early, he said. You were there for 40 minutes, and then you left. I was going to come find you, but you'd already gone. You were going to come find me. I said it flatly, trying to decide what it meant. Yes. Why? A pause. Not a tactical one this time. Something genuinely considered. Because I wanted to introduce you to Marco Reyes, he said, who is the head of a venture fund I've been thinking about collaborating with, and whose analytical background I thought you'd find interesting. And because I'd been looking for you for about 20 minutes before I realized you'd left. The floor did something strange, or I did something strange. The room maintained its structural integrity, but I felt like something had shifted in me, some long-held tension releasing all at once. You were looking for me, I said. I was looking for you. I put my hands on my knees to keep them from doing anything I'd have to explain. I didn't know that. I know you didn't. He was watching me with that careful precision, the way he watched things he was trying to understand. Alvin, I want to ask you something directly, and I want you to answer me directly. Can you do that? I can try. Are the personal reasons you mentioned, are they to do with me? The city was very bright outside the windows. Somewhere in the building's ventilation system, something hummed. My heart was somewhere up near my throat. Mr. James? David. I closed my eyes for 1 second, opened them. He hadn't moved. He was just watching me, patient and still, like a man who had decided he was going to wait for the answer regardless of how long it took. Yes, I said. They're to do with you. Silence, then. Okay. Just that. Okay. Not horrified, not professional and careful and sorry, but this is inappropriate. Just, okay. Like I had handed him a piece of information he was integrating into a larger picture. Okay, I repeated, a little helplessly. Thank you for telling me. He looked down at the letter, then back up at me. I'm going to ask you not to resign. Not yet. I think we should talk properly. Not here. Not at 9 in the morning with both of us on our guard. He paused. Would you have dinner with me? Off the clock. Nothing formal. I stared at him. You're asking me to dinner? Yes. After I just told you that my reason for leaving is that I have feelings for you. Because of that, yes. I didn't know what to do with that. I didn't have a filing system for it. I had spent 18 months convinced that the safest possible interpretation of every interaction with this man was the most professional one. And now he was sitting across from me asking me to dinner in a voice that was entirely level, but doing something around his eyes that I had never seen him do before. I need to think about that, I said. Of course. He slid the resignation letter into his desk drawer. Think about it. I'll leave the dinner open whenever you want to have it. I'll be available. I left. I thought about it for 11 days. I texted him on a Thursday. He had given me his personal number 18 months ago for after-hours work communication, which I had been aggressively using only for after-hours work communication, and wrote, Dinner on Saturday? He wrote back in under a minute. 7 o'clock. I'll send you the address. The address he sent was not a restaurant. It was an apartment building in the north quarter of the city. His apartment building, as it turned out. I want to be careful about this part, because it is the part that changed everything, and I want to do it justice. His apartment was quiet and full of books in a way that surprised me, though it probably shouldn't have. He made pasta from scratch, actually from scratch, with flour on the counter and a pasta machine bolted to the edge of the island. And when I asked, with genuine incredulity, if he always did this, he said, only when I want to impress someone. Over dinner, we talked about everything except work for the first time in 2 years. I learned that he'd grown up loud and in a loud household, and had spent his adult life building quiet around himself on purpose. That he had a younger sister he clearly adored. That he read novels the way I read market reports, fast and total and with notes in the margins. That he was funny, specifically, in a dry, understated way that only landed if you were paying close attention, and that he watched to see if you were. After dinner, we sat on his balcony with whiskey I didn't finish, and he said, looking out at the lights below, I've been trying to find the right moment to say something to you for about a year. A year, I repeated. 14 months if you want to be precise. Since the Henderson deal, when you worked for 72 hours without complaint, and then came to debrief me, and the first thing you said was, I think I found something bigger than the deal. And you were right. You were entirely right, and you'd spent 3 days alone with the numbers, and you'd found the thing no one else found. He swirled his glass. I didn't know what to do with it. I'm your employer. You were 27. It felt inappropriate, I supplied. Complicated, he said. I was trying to be careful with you. The city below us was full of lights, distant and indifferent. I had the sudden vertiginous feeling of someone looking down from a great height and realizing the ground is much closer than they thought. 14 months, I said. 14 months, he confirmed. I looked at him. He looked at me. We were both quiet for a long moment, with all the lights below and the evening air between us. You should have said something, I said. I know, he set his glass down. I'm saying it now. We stayed on that balcony until well past midnight. Nothing dramatic happened. No grand declarations, no sudden collision of all those months of feeling. We just talked and were honest and sat together with everything out in the open for the first time. And when I left, he walked me to the elevator and stood there until the doors closed with his hands in his pockets and an expression on his face that I had been translating wrong for 2 years. I had thought it was professional respect. It was something else entirely. The third resignation letter was 6 months later. I know what that looks like. but the third one is important, so stay with me. By that point, we had been, I don't have a clean word for what we had been. Not together exactly, but not separate either. We had dinner, sometimes his apartment, sometimes elsewhere. We talked in the mornings before the building filled with people. He read passages from novels out loud when he found something he liked, and I had stopped pretending I didn't love it. He knew things about me that I had been careful not to advertise. The way I would quiet when I was stressed, a specific type of problem that lit me up, the fact that I needed about 15 minutes of solitude after every large meeting to decompress. And at work, we were still, precisely and professionally, employer and employee. The line held because we both held it, because neither of us wanted the other one to have to navigate something uncomfortable, and because David was careful in a way that I had come to understand was actually his version of tenderness. Keeping things clean so I had room to breathe. I was grateful for it. I was also slowly, steadily going out of my mind. The third letter came after a board meeting where I had made a presentation that was, by any measure, the best work of my career. The room had listened, and then the room had turned, not unkindly, but conclusively to David, waiting for his verdict. His verdict was 3 sentences, precise and positive, and then the room had moved on. After, in the hallway, I had stood there feeling the particular deflation of being erased by someone's approval, and it hit me, suddenly, not gradually, that this was the structure of us, permanently. Me, excellent and visible to him, both of us, invisible in the ways that actually mattered. The third letter was not a running away letter. It was a clarity letter. It said essentially, I can't keep doing this in between. I need to know what we are, or I need to not be here. I left it with Lena on a Wednesday. He called my office directly this time. My office, he said. I went up. He was standing at the window, which was what he did when he was thinking hard. And he turned when I came in, and he looked different. The careful composure he carried like a second skin had a fracture in it. He had the letter in his hand, and he was holding it like it had surprised him, which was one of the only times I had seen David James look surprised. You're giving me an ultimatum, he said. I'm being honest. You are. He turned the letter over in his hand. I've been trying to do the right thing. I was afraid that moving too fast would. David, it was the first time I'd used his first name with that kind of directness. He stopped. What do you want? A long pause. A very long pause. The kind of pause that would have been tactical silence if his face wasn't doing something so entirely unguarded. You, he said. Clearly, I've wanted you specifically for a year and a half. I was trying to, then stop trying, I said. Stop being careful and just say it, without the space around it, without the professional distance. Just say what you mean. He put the letter down on the windowsill. He crossed the room. He stopped about 2 feet in front of me, closer than the established grammar of our professional relationship permitted, and he looked at me directly and said, I'm in love with you. I have been for a long time. I've been terrified of doing something wrong by you, and I think I've overcorrected so far into caution that it reads as indifference, and I'm sorry for that. My heart was doing about 5 things at once. Okay, I said. Okay, he said. We stood there for a moment. This is the third time I've said okay to you in place of a more complete response, he noted, very slightly dry. At least we're consistent, I said. He laughed. I had heard him laugh before. Not often, he was not a man who performed laughter, but when something actually struck him, it came out real and brief and surprised, and it did something irreversible to me every time. This time was no different. He tore the third letter in half, then in half again, then he dropped the pieces in his desk bin and looked at me. Don't resign, he said. You know eventually I'm going to have to actually leave for legitimate career reasons, I told him. I know. He returned to his desk, settling back into himself, except that the fracture was still there, the composure still softer than usual. I'll sign it when the reason is real, I promise. And in the meantime, he picked up his pen, cap still on, a small smile on his face that was private and not for the room. In the meantime, have dinner with me tonight. We have dinner most Thursdays, I said. Have dinner with me tonight knowing what I just said, he said. That's different. It was different. I want to tell you about the 8 months between the third and fourth letters honestly, because they were the best 8 months I had experienced in my adult life, and I am not going to sanitize them. David James, in private, was one of the most deliberate and attentive people I had ever known. By attentive, I don't mean anxious. I mean that when he was with me, he was entirely present, not thinking about the next deal, not half distracted by the phone on the table, not running a parallel mental track. His attention, when he chose to direct it at something, was total, and for those 8 months, he directed a significant portion of it at me, and the experience of that was, I will just say, significant. I had not known how much I'd needed that particular quality in a person until I was consistently exposed to it. We were careful at work. We agreed on that, and we both honored it. Not because we were ashamed of anything, but because both of us valued the work and the people in it, and neither of us wanted to introduce an asymmetry that would make others uncomfortable. In the building, we were what we had always been: professional, direct, respectful. If some people noticed something had changed, the something was difficult to specify, and nobody specified it. Outside the building was different. He took me to a market on a Sunday morning 3 weeks in and stood next to me in front of a stall of secondhand books, with his shoulder against mine, reading back covers out loud in the voices of the people who'd written the cover copy. And I stood there with the autumn light on both of us and thought, oh, this is just happiness. Plain and unremarkable happiness, the kind you read about and distrust because it seems too simple, and here it is anyway. He gave me a key to his apartment in the 4th month. Not formally, he mentioned it almost in passing, set it on the kitchen counter while we were making breakfast, and said, in case you're ever there before me. Like it was logistical, like it was just practical. I held that key in my hand for a moment, and then put it in my pocket, and didn't say anything, and he didn't say anything, and we continued making breakfast, and neither of us needed to say anything, because we both knew what it meant. In the 6th month, I told him the whole truth: the first notice, the 2 drafts, the long bath, the 312 days. He listened to all of it without interrupting. When I finished, he said, I should have said something sooner. I kept convincing myself you were better served by my restraint. And then, quieter, I was also scared. That's the honest version. He was not a man who admitted fear easily. I understood the weight of it. What were you scared of? I asked. That I'd read it wrong, that you were simply good at your job and I was projecting. That if I said something and I was wrong, I would have made things impossible for you, and you would have left, and he stopped. And I wasn't ready for that to happen. He was looking at me with an expression that I recognized by then, the soft fracture in the composure that appeared when he had stopped managing what his face was doing. I was trying to protect the situation, because the situation was the only way I could keep you close. That's very romantic, I said, and also a little bit chaotic as a strategy. It was a terrible strategy, he agreed. I'm aware. 14 months, I said. 14 months. We were very stupid, I said. Extremely, he agreed, and pulled me in by the front of my jacket and kissed me, and I thought, yes, well, better late than never. Better here than not at all. The 8th month is where the 4th letter comes from. The 4th letter was not my idea. I want to be completely clear about that. In the 8th month, the founder of a mid-size analytics firm reached out directly to me. He'd seen my work on the Harlow portfolio, which had been partially public-facing, and he wanted me for a role that was, genuinely and objectively, the next logical step in my career. Head of strategy, team leadership, equity stake, creative mandate, everything that any analyst would look at and recognize as the right move. I told David about it over dinner the same evening I got the call. He listened. He asked me 3 questions about the role. He was quiet for a moment after I answered all 3. You should take it, he said. I looked at him. I'm not saying I'm taking it. I know, but you should consider it seriously. It's the right kind of move. He poured more wine. I'd be doing you a disservice if I didn't say that clearly. It would mean leaving, I said. I know what it would mean. He met my eyes. Alvin, what we are, that exists separately from where you work. I don't want you to stay at James Capital because you're worried about the other thing. I'm not worried about the other thing. I know, but I want you to make the career decision on its own terms. If you take the role, we figure out the rest. He was very steady when he said it, the way he was when he'd already thought something through and had arrived at a place of genuine conviction. If you stay, I want it to be because the work here is what you want, not because of me. I spent 2 weeks thinking about it. I talked to the founder 3 more times. I ran the numbers on both paths, which I know is a strange way to approach a life decision, but numbers settle something in me that other processes can't. On a Monday evening, I wrote the 4th resignation letter. I was careful with it. I tried to make it true, not a placeholder, not a deflection, but an actual accounting of what the role at James Capital had meant, what I was taking with me, what I hoped for the transition. I left it with Lena. I'm going to tell you what happened next slowly, because it matters. I was at my desk the following morning when the call came. Not my office phone, my mobile, his name on the screen. Alvin. His voice was different. Not the professional register, the real one. I know what you're going to say, I said. You don't. A brief pause. Can you come up? Not the office. The roof terrace. Do you know it? I didn't know there was a roof terrace. 42 floors, and I hadn't known there was a roof terrace. He met me at the elevator bank and walked me through a door I'd never noticed, and we came out into a narrow strip of sky. Garden chairs, potted plants, the city spreading out in every direction in the early morning light. He had my letter in his hand. He didn't say anything for a moment. We stood in the morning air with the city below us, and he looked at the letter, and then at me, and then at the city again. I've been sitting with this since yesterday, he said finally. And I've been trying very hard to be objective. David, let me finish. He folded the letter, a careful crease, like he was being precise with it. The role is right for you, the timing is right, the terms are right. I can't manufacture a reason to reject this one on your behalf, and I wouldn't do that to you. He looked at me. But I want to ask you something before I sign it. Okay, if I was not a factor, if what we are didn't exist, and this was purely a career calculation, would you take it? Yes, I said, because it was true. And with it as a factor? I looked at him. He was backlit by the morning, looked like a man who was trying very hard not to ask for what he actually wanted, which I recognized because I had done it for 14 months myself. Still yes, I said. But I want to know if you want me to stay. Silence. That's not a fair thing to put on you, he said. I know it's not fair. I'm asking anyway. He put the letter in his pocket. He looked at the city for a moment, then back at me, and the composure was entirely gone now. Not fractured, gone. Just him, plainly, and without the architecture he usually kept around himself. Yes, he said. I want you to stay. Not for the work, I mean for the work too, you're exceptional at the work. But, he stopped, started again. I want you to stay because the last 8 months have been He paused. I'm not good at this kind of thing. You're doing fine, I said softly. I want you to stay because I can count on one hand the number of times in my life I have felt completely known by a person, and it's you. He said it simply, with no performance around it. That's the real answer. That's what I'd be negotiating against if I countersigned this. The morning was very quiet. 42 floors up, the city noise was abstract, distant. David, I said, I have a counter-proposal. He looked at me. 6 months, I said. I go to the new role, I take the step, and we navigate the rest of it the way we've been navigating everything else, honestly and with the lights on. The other thing doesn't go away because I change buildings. I looked at him steadily. But I need you to sign the letter, not because I don't want this, but because I need to know that the way I feel about you doesn't determine my ceiling. A long pause, the longest pause I had ever watched him hold. Then, 6 months. 6 months, I said. He took the letter back out of his pocket. He unfolded it. He took a pen from inside his jacket and signed the counter-signature line. Then he looked at it for a second before he handed it back to me. You know, he said, you've made me sign 4 resignation letters and none of them have been about the job. In fairness, I said, the first 3 weren't about the job either. Something happened on his face, private and not performed. Come here, he said. He had never said that to me before. He wasn't a person who said things like that. But he said it on that roof, with the morning around us, and I closed the 2 steps between us, and he put his arms around me, with the city sprawled out in every direction, and the resignation letter still in my hand. We stayed like that for a while, long enough for the light to shift. For the record, he said, his voice low and close, I'm going to be terrible at 6 months. I know, I said. I'll probably text you every day. I know. I might possibly show up with lunch. David. Once, twice at most. That is deeply inappropriate. I'm aware. A pause. I'm also aware that I fell in love with you in this building, and you've just handed me a signed document that says you're leaving it, and I'm trying to be reasonable about that and finding it more difficult than I expected. I tightened my hold, slightly. I know. You keep saying I know. Because I do know. I know exactly how this feels. I've been feeling it for 26 months. I leaned back enough to look at him. That's the thing, David. I know you. I know how hard this is for you. And I'm still going, because that's how much I trust that we're going to be fine. He looked at me for a moment. We're going to be fine, he said, like he was deciding it. We're going to be fine, I confirmed. The 6 months are over. I should clarify. They were over 7 months ago. So it has now been 13 months since I left James Capital Group. And I am going to tell you what happened during those 6 months and after them, because this story deserves its ending told properly. The new role was everything it promised to be, hard in the ways I'd expected and hard in ways I hadn't anticipated. Team leadership is a different skill than individual analysis, and learning it in real time with real stakes is humbling in a very specific way. I made mistakes, I made good calls, I built something that started to feel, slowly, like mine. David texted me every day. He had promised once or twice at most with lunches, but the texts were daily, and I won't pretend I was anything other than glad. They were often work adjacent. He would send me something from the financial press and add a single line of commentary, or ask my read on a sector movement. Sometimes they were not work adjacent at all. I found your bookmark in my copy of The Brothers Karamazov. You left it at page 412 about 8 months ago. I assume you want to know how it ends. I do, I sent back. He makes the right choice, but it costs him. I thought you'd appreciate that. Very on brand for the novel, I sent. Then, very on brand for you. He sent back a single period, which from David James meant he was smiling. We had dinner on Sundays when work permitted. Not every Sunday. Some weeks the demands of both our roles made it impossible, and we had agreed early on that the relationship would not become a source of pressure for either of us. Some weeks we went 10 or 12 days without seeing each other, and it was fine, because we both knew what was there on the other side of those 10 or 12 days, and that knowledge was stable in a way I hadn't known a feeling could be. At 3 months he came to an event at my new firm, an industry thing, press and clients and contacts, a room full of people performing their professional selves. I saw him across the room, and something in me settled. Not with relief exactly, more like recognition. There was the person I was looking for. He came to find me, not because I was easy to find actually, but because he was looking specifically for me. He stood next to me for 20 minutes and talked to 3 people I introduced him to, and then, when there was a gap, he said quietly, "You're good at this." At what? You've always been better at rooms than you think. You're not supposed to be managing my professional confidence. That's not the arrangement. I know. I'm mentioning it as a private person who noticed, not as anything else. He was right. The distinction was real. And I was something. Not embarrassed. Warmed. Deeply, simply warmed. At 5 months, I took him to see the apartment I'd been renting since I started the new role. I had moved, new commute, new neighborhood, new lease. I had not invited him before because I wanted the space to be actually mine first, properly and personally mine before I let him into it. He walked around the apartment slowly, taking it in, looked at the books on the shelves, looked at the coffee maker, looked at the window and the view, which was not as impressive as his. "It suits you," he said. "It does," I agreed. He turned to look at me and said nothing. And I looked back at him and said nothing. And then I crossed the room and he met me halfway, and that was the moment the 6 months were effectively over, emotionally, even if the calendar still had 30 days to run. The actual end of 6 months was a Sunday evening. He came for dinner. I cooked. Not from scratch, but real food with effort behind it. Afterward, we sat on the smaller, less impressive version of a balcony, with the city at a lower altitude than either of us was used to. And he said, 6 months. 6 months, I said. You said we'd be fine. We are fine. We are. He was holding his glass with both hands, looking at the lights below. I want to ask you something. Okay? The job. Is it what you needed it to be? I thought about that honestly. Yes, it was hard in the right ways. I grew. I know things now that I couldn't have learned staying where I was. I paused. I don't regret leaving. I know. He said it without weight, without injury. He had been generous about this from the beginning. His generosity with my autonomy was one of the things I loved most. I want to ask you something else. All right. He set his glass down. He turned to look at me directly. I've been thinking for a while about asking you whether you'd like to come back. I stared at him. To James Capital? There's a position, Senior Director of Acquisition Strategy. I created it about 4 months ago. I've been leaving it open. He met my gaze. I want to be completely clear that this is a legitimate role, and it would be wrong of you to take it unless the work itself is what you want. I'm not using it as a mechanism. I know you're not, I said. You'd never do that. I wanted to be explicit. He was watching me carefully, the way he watched things that mattered. The work would be different. More scope, more accountability, more yours. A brief pause. And I would very much like to be in the same building as you again. But that is entirely secondary to whether the role is right for you. I looked at him, I looked at the city, I looked at the glass in my hand. Can I have the full brief? I asked. He reached inside his jacket and took out a folded set of papers. You brought the brief, I said. I've been carrying it for 2 weeks, he said, waiting for the right moment. I stopped. Actually, that's completely in character. I know, he said. I took the brief, I read it there and then, on the balcony while he sat next to me and didn't rush me and refilled my glass when it was empty. By the time I reached the last page, the city had gone darker and the lights had come up fuller, and I set the papers on my knee and sat with it for a moment. I'd want to negotiate the scope of the team, I said. I expected that. And the reporting structure needs to be clarified. Already flagged it as negotiable. I looked at him. He was watching me with the private, small expression that was his version of the most open he allowed himself to be. And I thought, as I had thought many times over the last 13 months, but never more clearly than right then, that this man had been worth every one of those resignation letters. Every single one. I'll come back, I said. He exhaled. Not dramatically, quietly, the way someone releases something they've been holding without announcing they were holding it. Good, he said. I'm going to need a very good onboarding experience, I said. I've been gone over a year. The internal systems have probably changed. I'll personally oversee the onboarding, he said. That seems like an inappropriate use of the senior director's time. He picked up his own glass. I'm told I have a habit of being inappropriately involved with high-performing analysts. I've heard that about you, I agreed. We stayed on the balcony until late, talking about the role and other things and nothing in particular. The city below us doing what cities do at night, indifferent to everything and quietly magnificent anyway. At some point, he moved from his chair to next to me on the small outdoor love seat, which only barely fit two people, and we sat there in the way that we sat together by now, familiar and easy and complete. For the record, I said at some point, I've been keeping the 4 letters. He looked at me. Have you? In a folder, chronologically. Why? I thought about it. I think because they're the story, actually. The whole arc of it. 4 letters, and what you wrote back on all of them. I paused. The first 3 you rejected. The 4th you signed. The 4th had a real reason, he said. They all had real reasons, I said. Just not the ones I wrote down. He was quiet for a moment. I should have made it easier for you, he said. You were trying to be careful. I overcorrected. You did. I glanced at him. I also could have been braver sooner. We were both managing our fear very responsibly. A corner of his mouth lifted. Very responsibly. And it got us here, I said. He looked at the city. It got us here, he agreed. Here. Here is a Sunday evening, late, on a small balcony with a man I love. That word has been inside me for so long, it no longer needs to be treated carefully. It's just part of the landscape. Here is a job offer in my lap that is the right job at the right time. Here is a version of my life that I would not have been able to describe 2.5 years ago, but that I recognize, utterly and without reservation, as mine. The resignation letters are in a folder in my desk drawer. 4 of them. The first one he rejected outright because I wasn't ready to say what I actually meant. The second one he set aside because he was beginning to understand what I couldn't yet say. The third one he tore up because we had finally said it. The fourth one he signed because he loved me enough to let me go and trusted, correctly, that letting go was not the same as losing. I have a 5th letter in my desk as well. I wrote it about 3 weeks after taking the new role. I've never given it to anyone. It's not a resignation letter. It's addressed to him, and it says, in one paragraph without any placeholders, exactly what I should have put in the first one. I'm leaving because I'm in love with you, and being near you every day, knowing you don't know that, is making me smaller. And I refuse to let anything make me smaller. Not even you. Especially not you. A.M. I'll give it to him someday. Maybe soon. Or maybe I'll just tell him. Which is, when you cut through all the letters and all the careful language, and all the 14 months and 6 months and everything in between, what we should have been doing from the beginning. Just telling each other the true thing. It turns out that's enough. It turns out it's more than enough. It turns out it's everything. If you made it to the end, you're my kind of person. Leave a subscribe. Comment down your favorite part of the story. And if you want early access to videos, exclusive content, or just want to support the channel, hit that join button right below the video. Even one member genuinely means the world to me. See you in the next one.